Poor people will rub off on you, don't even sanitize. Some carry antiseptic for garlic because it's the dry season. It's unclear whether Wendy, my mother-in-law, carries it for that reason or another, but one thing is certain, her actions reek of malice. Mom, let's go home, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. Okay, I understand, let's go, she replied, her tone distant. On the way home, Mary, my daughter, said something that sent a chill through the air. So, your company's going to go bankrupt? Her words struck like a thunderbolt, her anger cutting through the cool evening breeze. A life marked by love and loss. My name is Sasha James, I turned 55 this year, I don't have a husband, my daughter, Maria, was born 25 years ago, and on that very day, I lost the love of my life. My husband, a company CEO, was always busy but never too busy to love me. He proposed despite my doubts about being a CEO's wife. I thought we could make it work, but fate had other plans. The day Mary was born, my husband rushed to the hospital to see us. He had recently undergone heart bypass surgery, and while it seemed successful, his heart gave out on the way. He never made it back. The delivery room, once filled with the joy of a new life, became a place of mourning. Despite my grief, I had to keep going. For Mary, raising her alone was an exhausting journey. When Mary was young, her preschool teacher reprimanded her for being unkind to a friend. I scolded her harshly, and though she tried to explain, she ended up in tears. Every day was a struggle, but over time, she matured, learning to communicate better. Being a single mother was challenging, and I often faced prejudice. Still, Mary and I made countless precious memories together. A daughter's new chapter. Mary graduated from college and recently turned 25. Happy birthday, Mary, I said, presenting a homemade cake. Wow, Mom, you made this? It's amazing. Thank you, Mary beamed, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. This might be our last birthday celebration, just the two of us, I said, glancing at the engagement ring on her finger. Next year, we'll celebrate with everyone. Mary had come home days earlier, her face glowing as she showed off the silver ring. David proposed, she announced. Her joy reminded me of my own engagement day. Mary and David had been together since high school, weathering nearly a decade of challenges to reach this point. Watching her smile, I couldn't help but feel bittersweet. It'll be lonely when she leaves, I muttered, staring at the flickering candle. Unexpectedly, tears welled up and rolled down my cheeks. Mom, thank you for everything, Mary said, her voice steady. Even after I get married, I'll always be your daughter. Welcoming David. David came to our home to formally ask for Mary's hand in marriage. Sasha, thank you for looking after us for 10 years, he said earnestly. I promise to make Mary happy, please let me marry her. What should I do? I teased, breaking the tension. Mom, stop, Mary laughed, her cheeks turning pink. We all chuckled, and the sadness of Mary leaving began to lift. Seeing them together, I knew her happiness lay with David. David was already like family, we had taken trips together, and his respect for tradition felt almost unnecessary. Still, I admired his sincerity. David, I said, Mary has always struggled with expressing her emotions. Please be patient with her. When things are difficult, talk them through. But if she does something like cheating, I smirked. Bring her to me immediately. Laughter filled the room, echoing in my heart. Meeting Wendy. David's mother, Wendy, ran her own company, which caused repeated delays for the family meeting. Mom, it's just hard to find a time since she's a CEO, Mary explained. I understand, I said, though I couldn't shake my unease. After several cancellations, Wendy finally set a date. Last Saturday of the month. Don't cancel again, Mary insisted, her tone sharper than usual. When the day of the meeting arrived, my uneasiness grew. I dressed in formal attire, anticipating that Wendy might criticize casual clothing. Mom, you don't have to dress so formally for this, Mary said, trying to reassure me. I just have a feeling Wendy would find fault if I didn't, I replied. We arrived at the restaurant early, waiting for David and Wendy. When they arrived, Wendy's presence immediately dominated the room. Her aura was polished, sharp, and intimidating. I'm Wendy, David's mother, she said curtly. Her movements were graceful, her tone commanding, and her gaze cut like a knife. Without waiting for pleasantries, she sighed and led the way inside. Sorry about my mom, David whispered apologetically. She's always been like this, even I find her difficult. It's okay, David, I said, forcing a smile. She seems like someone from another world, almost like nobility. At the word nobility, David's expression clouded, but he said nothing. Mom's already inside. Let's go, Mary urged. The atmosphere felt heavy as I followed them into a private dining room. Wendy was already seated in the place of honor, her posture perfect and deliberate. Every detail of her demeanor seemed calculated to make a statement. David, sit here, Mary, there, and you, by the door, Wendy instructed, gesturing coldly. It felt like she was subtly assigning me the lowest rank in the room. I've heard you have back problems, Wendy added with a thin smile. You'll need to be near the door in case you need the restroom, perhaps even a wheelchair. Her words were dripping with condescension. Thank you for the consideration, I said with a calm smile, but wouldn't it be better for you to sit by the door? You might need it more. Wendy's face hardened, clearly unused to being addressed in such a manner. No need to worry about me, thank you for your concern, she replied icily, her smile never reaching her eyes. The meal began in stiff silence, broken only by Wendy's smug remarks. Didn't your parents teach you the proper order to eat food? Wendy said, her tone dripping with superiority. You start with soup, then bread, followed by the main dish, and finally the side dishes. It's common sense, and basic manners. She proceeded to lecture us on the importance of this peculiar dining sequence, explaining that soup stimulates digestion. David smiled awkwardly, clearly accustomed to these rigid rules. But this wasn't how I had raised Mary. I had only taught her the basics: don't chew loudly, don't talk with your mouth full, and never walk around during meals. Wendy's elaborate etiquette seemed more suited for a royal banquet than everyday life. When Mary reached for the main dish first, Wendy's eyes flashed with disapproval. What Wendy is saying might be correct, I said, breaking the tense silence. But isn't the heart of manners about consideration for others? Criticizing someone's lack of manners is, in itself, poor manners. Wendy's face flushed with anger, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Talking to someone so uncultured is exhausting, she snapped. David, you should reconsider this marriage. Mary's mother is too crude for our family. Turning to Mary, she added, perhaps you should cut ties with this woman and learn proper manners if you want to be our daughter-in-law. David pleaded with her to stop, but she ignored him, her tirade building. Then, without warning, Wendy pulled a bottle from her bag and dumped its contents over my head. The stinging smell of alcohol filled the air. Poor people rub off on you, she said with a smirk. You need to be sanitized. Shock froze me in place as the liquid dripped from my hair. Mom, let's go, Mary said, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Yes, I said, rising slowly, trying to maintain my composure. David stood frozen, his face pale with disbelief. Mary took my hand and glared at Wendy, who simply smirked in return. I'm sorry, David, Mary said coldly, but don't apologize for her. She may think she's from a higher class, but soon enough, your company will go bankrupt. Wendy's smirk faltered as Mary's words cut through the tension like ice. Mary didn't wait for a response. She wiped the liquid from my clothes and led me out. We never returned to see Wendy again. David's apology. Days later, David arrived at our home, looking pale and exhausted. I should have apologized sooner, he said, his voice trembling, but I've been trying to convince my mother to admit she was wrong. She won't listen, so I came to apologize on my own. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his words. Though David wasn't my son, he had been part of our lives for 10 years, and it hurt to see him in such distress. Come inside, David, I said gently. Let's have some tea. You've been through a lot, are you okay? He hesitated before answering, as if gathering the courage to share what was on his mind. To be honest, I've always hated my mom, he confessed. She's always demanded repayment for raising me, always pressuring me to meet her expectations. I could imagine his situation all too well. I was told from a young age that I was the heir, that I had to follow the family's plan, but in high school, I rebelled. She wanted me to attend a prestigious private school, but I chose a public school with a baseball team instead. His face softened at the memory. That's where I met Mary, he said, his voice steadying. She was the team manager. I fell in love with her, and no matter what my mother says, I want to marry her. Please let me marry her. David trembled as he knelt on the floor, tears glistening in his eyes. David, look up, I said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This isn't about me, it's about you and Mary. Over these 10 years, I've seen how deeply you care for her. If you love her that much, You don't need my permission, you already have my blessing. Tears streamed down David's face as relief washed over him. I trusted David with Mary's happiness. Slowly, he lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. The weight of his mother's actions must have terrified him, making him fear that everything he cherished might be lost. Yet, those tears revealed just how deeply he cared for Mary. David, I said softly, if you truly want to make Mary happy, you need to break free from your past. I understand, he replied, his voice trembling. This is about my mother, isn't it? I nodded silently. I'm tired of living in fear of her, he admitted, his voice growing steadier. My father, who's still in the hospital, was the only one who ever understood me. He once told me that my mother could never see beyond her own ambitions. For his sake, I've made up my mind. I met his gaze firmly. I'll support you and Mary, David, but it's up to you to take the next step. I understand, he said resolutely. I'll do it. The day finally came. Wendy arrived at the restaurant with a sour expression, clearly displeased. What is this cheap place? She asked, her voice filled with disdain as she scanned the humble family restaurant. It was a setting far removed from the elegance she was accustomed to. These are the papers for the adoption, I said, sliding the documents across the table. Adoption? She repeated, her confusion evident. Yes, David is officially joining our family. This is outrageous, Wendy shouted, rising from her seat and slamming the table. He's my only son, how dare you try to take him from me? Her anger quickly turned to venom as she glared at Mary. This marriage is a joke. Mary isn't worthy of David. We are of a different class. We help people like you, not the other way around. Wendy's words grew more unhinged, but I remained calm. Why are you so obsessed with social status, Wendy? I asked. I work with many wealthy clients, but those truly born into wealth don't act like you. Only those who've recently come into money seem this insecure. Wendy's composure faltered, her hands trembling. Don't compare me to those people, she hissed. I was born into wealth. Your actions say otherwise. What are you so afraid of? At the word afraid, Wendy froze. David told me you grew up being told you weren't good enough, because you were a girl, I continued. Her lips trembled. So what? I was born a girl in a family where only men mattered. I had to marry an older man just to preserve my family's status. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, and the truth of her obsession finally came to light. That's why you're so fixated on David being the heir. But if he marries Mary, your family's perfect lineage will be mixed with a... Shut up, Wendy shouted, cutting me off. Enough. The room fell silent as David's father, Brian, entered, pushed in a wheelchair by his son. Though still recovering, he had received special permission to leave the hospital for this meeting. Wendy's face turned ashen. No, you misunderstood, she stammered, her voice unsteady. I never thought marrying you was humiliating. You were just what? Brian interrupted with a weary sigh. Dad says he's divorcing you, Mom, David said, his voice firm. Divorce? Wendy's voice broke. No, please, say something, Brian. But Brian remained silent, refusing even to look at her. Sorry to interrupt, Mary said, her voice calm yet cutting, but we've finalized all the necessary paperwork. Wendy flinched at Mary's words, visibly nervous. Oh, and by the way, Mary added, I own a significant amount of stock in your company. Wendy's eyes widened. What? That's impossible. Actually, it's true, Mary continued. I've held a substantial amount of shares in your company for quite some time. Realization dawned on Wendy's face as she pieced the truth together. Wait, were you that anonymous investor? That's right, Mary said with a small smile. But how? How could a poor family like yours invest that much? Wendy demanded, her voice rising with disbelief. I've been running my late husband's company ever since he passed away, I said calmly, and Mary has helped me manage it. We decided to sell all the shares we hold in your company. Wendy's face turned ghostly pale. No, please don't do that. If you sell now, the company will collapse under its debt. And after you're out of the picture, I'll buy back the shares, David interjected. You've been embezzling money from the company, haven't you, Mom? No, that's not true, Wendy protested, her voice shrill. I was just borrowing a little. I plan to pay it back. Even if you're the owner, you can't use company funds for personal reasons, David said coldly. You could face criminal charges. Wendy was at a loss, unable to defend herself. I've looked into everything, Mom. You've been dealing with shady loan sharks. haven't you? Tears streamed down Wendy's face. I didn't have a choice. I'll pay them back, just don't sell the shares. It's too late for that, David said firmly. From now on, you're no longer the head of the company. Please don't do this. I'll lose everything, Wendy pleaded desperately. David's face remained impassive. Mom, you've always seen me as a tool, not as your son. No, that's not true. I love you, David. If that's true, then tell me, what's my favorite food? Wendy fell silent, unable to answer. See, David said quietly, you don't even know. I'm just a tool to you. Now you'll have to fend for yourself. After David severed ties with her, Wendy's life spiraled out of control. Shunned by her family, she was left to face the consequences of her actions. David quickly removed her from her position as head of the company and appointed a new CEO. Wendy was sued for embezzlement and faced both criminal and civil charges. Desperate to escape her debts and legal troubles, she fled town, only to be arrested for theft. She was sentenced to prison, where she served her time alone. Not a single family member visited her. Meanwhile, David and Mary quietly began their new life together. They held a small, private wedding with close family in attendance. One day, Mary invited me to a baseball game, just like old times. On the way home, she handed me a black and white photograph. Mom, she said with a smile, you're going to be a grandmother. I haven't told David yet. I wanted you to be the first to know. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the picture. I'm so happy we could go to the game together, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Next time, let's bring the whole family. Mary nodded. From a distance, I watched my daughter, her husband, and my newborn grandchild. What seemed like an ordinary day was, for us, a moment filled with joy and meaning.